come to bless this session in our study this morning. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for gathering us together. Thank you for what you have done in our lives, and I pray that you would save souls. I pray that you would reach down and help people to see your glory. Father, as we study these angels, help us to understand the evil angels. As we studied good angels last week, Lord, give us a better understanding of the evil angels and the things in which they do and their names and how they act and things like that. Father, I pray that you would just help us and bless this study. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right. Evil angels. Evil angels. Just as we did with the good angels, we're going to look at the evil angels' names as well as their titles. Okay, their names and their titles. And the first name or title that we see from them is devils, and we also see demons. Okay, devils and demons. And so in Matthew chapter 4, in verse 24, it reads, those which were possessed with devils. In Luke chapter 4 and verse 33, in the synagogue there was a man which had a spirit of an unclean devil and cried out with a loud voice. And then in James chapter 2, in verse 19, we heed the warning, thou believest there is one God, thou doest well. The devils also believe and tremble. And so as we understand these evil angels, we know that they are called devils, and that's really not much of a surprise to us, as we have used that even in our own culture. We use those terms and those kind of things. But there's several other names outside of devils. They also are called devil's angels. Devil's angels, and this is because they fell with Satan when he rebelled against the Lord. And so, devil's angels, Matthew chapter 25 and verse 41, then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. And so they're ascribed to him, they're under his charge. And then in Revelation chapter 12, as it speaks of the great dragon in verse 9, being cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, it says he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And so we see the devil's angels are part of these evil angels as well. And then they're ascribed as unclean. And so God is all about cleanliness, and we, when we are saved, we are made white as snow. We are made clean through his righteousness and those kind of things. But these angels, these fallen angels, they are unclean spirits. In Luke chapter 7 and verse 21, and in the same hour he cured many of their infirmities and plagues and of evil spirits, and unto many that were blind he gave sight. Acts chapter 19 and verse 12 and 13 says, so that from the body were brought unto the sick handkerchiefs and aprons, and the diseases departed from them, and the evil spirits went out of them. And certain of the vagabond Jews exorcists took upon them to call over them which had evil spirits the name of the Lord Jesus, saying, we adjure you by Jesus whom Paul preacheth. And so these angels would come in and they would bring sicknesses and diseases, and they would make the body unclean and things like that, as they are unclean spirits. And then in verse 4 or verse 1 of 1 Timothy chapter 4, we see a seducing spirit. Okay, they are seducing spirits. It says, now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. And so these spirits these evil angels will seduce people and pull them away from the church. They will confuse them and draw them back. And that is kind of the apostasy that will take place. And then we see the wicked spirits in Luke chapter 11 and verse 24 to 26. When the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest and finding none. He saith, I will return unto my house, whence I came out. And when he cometh, he findeth it swept and garnished. And then goeth he and taketh to him 7 other serpents more wicked than himself. And they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. And so we see this aspect of once one has access, they can then usher in many more as we get into that. And then not only do we have their names or their titles, if you will, that we just covered, but we have their location. We have their location, and there's 2 locations that these fallen, evil angels are at. And the first set we see is an unchained angel. And the unchained angels have a certain amount of freedom at the present time. And they're allowed to kind of move around a little bit and those kind of things. And so we see this in Psalm 78 and verse 49, where he says, he cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath, and indignation and trouble by sending evil angels among them. And so they were allowed to move about and those kind of things. Ephesians chapter 6 in verse 12 says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So these angels are able to kind of move about on earth and do different things. Revelation chapter 12 and verse 7 to 9. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought in his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil, Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And so when this great battle happened with the rebellion of Satan and the third part of the angels, when this happened before the foundation of this earth and the life that we know as humanity, before the creation account, as we have all of that, they fell and they were cast down to the earth, and they have been moving about the earth ever since. And so those are our unchained angels. Those are the ones that have freedom to move about the earth and kind of make way to do different things. The second group of angels that we see, though, is the chained angels. It's the chained angels. And these angels have absolutely no freedom at the present time. There is coming a day where these angels will be loosed, and that will happen during the tribulation period in the end times. But currently, they are chained and have no freedom. 2 Peter in chapter 2 and verse 4 says, for if God spared not his angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. And then verse 6 of the book of Jude recalls these chained angels as he hath reserved in everlasting chains under the darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. And so they are in their own habitation. They are chained. They cannot have freedom and move about and do different things. They are bound into the place where God has placed them. And so now that we know their titles and who they are and kind of what they're doing and those kind of things, or where they're at, let's look at what they're doing. What are their activities? And there's a few different activities that they have. And in some of these activities are not maybe necessarily what we would think they are. And so the first activity is they oppose God's purpose. They oppose God's purpose. And as we understand the purposes of God to be glorified and to see us and for us to worship Him and all of these different things, to bring about, with all things, to bring about good and working in that way. These angels are going to completely oppose God in everything He attempts to do. And let me just remind you, they don't get the victory. Amen. And so Daniel chapter 10, in verse 10 to 14, says, "And behold, an hand touched me, which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. And he said unto me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright. For unto thee am I now sent. And when he had spoken this word unto me, I stood trembling. And then he said unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God. Thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the king of Persia. Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days." And so as God was working with Daniel and doing different things, these angels were working with Persia and rebelling and opposing God's purposes. And then we see in Ephesians chapter 6, as we talk about the whole armor of God, Paul charges the Ephesians and all of us Christians in verses 11 and 12 to put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand the wiles of the devil, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And so then he goes on to list the principalities, powers, the rulers of the darkness, and spiritual wickedness. And so, when we are battling this Christian battle, and we're fighting the Christian war, we're not battling flesh. We're not against one another. We're not against brothers and sisters. We're not against the people of the world. It is a spiritual battle as these evil angels are opposing God on every side, and they're opposing God's people as well. They also execute Satan's program or his plan. Okay, they execute what Satan desires for them to do. 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 1 says, "Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to spirits and doctrines of devils." And so they have bought off on the teachings of Satan, and they produce those teachings for others. And we're seeing a huge group in America right now come up, and those are the satanic worshipers. They have erected statues in I believe it's Oklahoma, and there's this huge following of the doctrine of Satan. More people in America now believe in Satan than they do in God. And so we're in a really strange time where Satan right now is getting more glory, if you will, than God does. And these things have to come about in order for Christ to come back and for the tribulation and all these things to take place. And so we don't get worried about it. We don't get stressed out about it. We just take our mission all the more serious, and we share the gospel, and we try to teach and preach, and we try to educate and those kind of things, and help lead people to Christ that he may save them. And so Revelation chapter 16 also speaks of these devils executing Satan's program. And Revelation 16 and verse 12 to 14 says, "The sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, And out of the mouth of the beast and out of the mouth of the false prophets, for they are the spirits of devils, working miracles which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. And so, as we look at prophecy and the things that are going to take place, they're spreading the propaganda that Satan desires them to spread. They're working diligently to bring people to Satan and to get him to be worshipped over God. And this has always been Satan's goal. This has always been Satan's agenda, to be like the Most High God, to be worshipped and adored as God is. And so we see this program that takes place, and as they execute Satan's program, they disseminate this false doctrine that we've been looking at. In 2 Thessalonians speaks of this false doctrine a little bit more in chapter 2 and verse 2. 2 Thessalonians says that they be not soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as to the day of Christ is at hand. 1 Timothy 4:1. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines or teachings of devils. And as they spread this doctrine, as they spread this teaching, as many fall away and go to it, they begin to afflict human beings. They begin to afflict human beings. In Matthew chapter 17 and verse 15, Lord, have mercy on my son. This is the man with a lunatic as a child that has been, that has been possessed and has not been able to be relieved from this evil spirit. And he says that he's sore vexed, and oftentimes he falleth into the fire and oft into the water. And the spirit's just kind of really beating him up and causing a lot of pain and a lot of misery, and at times even going to the point of trying to kill this man or this boy. And Jesus rebuked the devil. He rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. And sometimes the things that we deal with, or that we see people dealing with, we kind of put under the umbrella of what psychology would have you to think, in thinking that it's simply a chemical thing, or simply a personal issue or something like that, when really at the root of it, it is a complete spiritual battle that is happening in that individual. Mark 5 and verse 15 says, and they came to Jesus, seeing him that was possessed with the devil, and had the legion, sitting and clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Acts chapter 5 and verse 16. We see a spiritual battle come, as it says, there came as a multitude out of the cities round about unto Jerusalem, being sick folks, and them which were vexed with unclean spirits, and they were healed every one. Every time there's an affliction of these unclean spirits, every time there's an affliction of these devils and satanic beings, there is the desire from the human to be relieved from that affliction. And we see another period of affliction in Acts chapter 8 and verse 7, for the unclean spirits crying with a loud voice, they came out of many that were possessed with them, and many taken with palsies, and that were lame were healed. And the palsies and the lame was caused by these unclean spirits. And so this is not always the case. Just because there's an ailment in your life or something like that, it doesn't mean that it's an unclean spirit doing it necessarily. And so understand that they only have the power that God allows them to have in our life. And we ought not focus in on the affliction of being from Satan or from these demonic beings or anything like that. But we ought to stand firm in the faith and trust the Lord through it all, just as Job did. And Satan brought in a lot of afflictions upon Job through his life, and Job never focused his sole attention on Satan. He would always work his way back to the Lord and focusing in on the Lord, and that's ought to be our position as well. The other thing that they can do, as we've kind of seen here, is as they've been called out of many people, is they can possess unsaved human beings. Now they cannot, they do not have the ability or the permission to possess a saved person. They can possess an unsaved person. Why? Why is that? Well, because we have the Holy Spirit. Once we're saved, God dwells in us. And we have a hedge of protection around us, if you will, that prevents them from possessing us, from actually getting inside of us and manipulating and controlling in that way. God prevents that from happening. But for the unsaved individual, that possibility is there, and we see this in Matthew chapter 9 in verse 33. When the devil was cast out, the dumb spake, and the multitudes marveled, saying, "It was never so seen in Israel." And so they've seen these people that were possessed, but never seen them cast out, and now Christ was doing that. And that's the power that Christ has, and that's why it's for the unsaved, not the saved, because Christ casts out that demonic entity and does not allow that to happen with us. Matthew chapter 15 in verse 22, "Behold, a woman, Canaan, came out of the same coasts and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David, my daughter is grievously vexed with a devil. Jesus said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith, be it unto thee even as thou wilt, and her daughter was made whole from that very hour." And so it is by faith that we are cleansed. It is by faith that we are saved. It is by faith that we are protected. And so having that faith in Christ is what prevents you from many of these attacks and things like that. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 3 gives us light into their destiny. And so we've looked at their names and their titles. We've looked at their locations. We've looked at their activities. And now we're gonna kind of close in this morning in looking at their destiny. What is the destiny of the demonic spirits? What is the destiny of these evil angels? What's the destiny of Satan as the ruler of these evil angels? And the destiny of them is first and foremost found in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 3. And it is to be judged by Christ and the believers. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 3 says, "Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life?" And so this is speaking of an aspect of being part of Christ in observing and being afforded really that opportunity to serve with the Lord and to reign with the Lord in having a judgment, so to speak. Now, understand this, that Christ is the judge. He is the one that will be casting the judgment. He is the one that will be fulfilling the judgment. We get no glory in this. We simply are grafted in with him and get to participate and observe and things like that. But we do not get any glory in this. All the glory goes to God. The angels that will be battling with Christ in the end times will not get any glory. They simply get to participate. The creation gets to participate with the Creator. And that's what's happening here. And so we don't, we're not riding in on a horse or anything like that, waging battle. But we will be afforded the opportunity as we receive his righteousness to bestow that righteous judgment on the angels. And so Then we see their ultimate destiny after that judgment of Christ to be cast into the lake of fire forever. And Matthew 25 speaks of this in verse 41. It says, "Then shall he say also unto them that are them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devils and his angels." Understand this, hell was never designed for humanity. Hell was never designed for us to go to. It was designed for Satan and his angels, the third of the angels that fell with him. And so as we refuse to accept Christ, as we live our own life and deny Christ and his teachings and things like that, then we are made to go to this place because God cannot be in the presence of sin. But the everlasting fire was designed and prepared specifically for the devils and the angels. And it expands every time a sinner dies and has to go there. And so 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4, we'll visit it again, as well as Jude 6, in this time of looking at being cast into the lake of fire forever. And 2 Peter says, "For if God spared not his angels that sinned, but cast them into hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment." And so they're cast into this lake of fire, this hell. In Jude chapter 6, Jude verse 6 says that the angels which kept not their first estate. What's that first estate? That first estate is they were created in heaven, and they were created to worship the Lord, and they were created to serve him and those kind of things. And then when they rebelled, they kept not their first estate. They moved on to try with pride to try to overthrow God. And when they rebelled against him, rebelled against that first estate of being made to worship him, they left their own habitation, Jude 6 says. "He hath reserved them everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day." And so what's the destiny? They're going to be judged, and they're going to be cast into the lake of fire forever. And so I hope that helps you this morning as we close up the angels and talking about them. And so I hope you have a better understanding of how they work and what they do. They've deceived many people. They've pulled many people away. They've created a lot of false religions and things like that people have gotten sucked into. They are still at work as we look at some of the issues that are going on in our world today, and the sicknesses and the destruction and the affliction and the pain and the agony and the power of control and all of these different things that happen, as Ephesians chapter 6 warns us about. They are well at work, and we need to be observant in the aspect of knowing how to withstand. And so remember, we're not charged to fight them. We're not charged to flee from them. We're just charged to stand and stand on the faith of Jesus Christ in his word. And that is how we overcome, because he has already overcome the world. And so I hope you'll join us back this morning here in about 30 minutes at 11 a.m. as we start our Sunday morning service. Riley will be playing a couple songs for you again this morning. And then we're going to look at kind of what's going on with COVID-19 and kind of how that applies to some biblical prophecy. And so we'll be looking at some different things that the Bible speaks about in prophetic terms, the end times and things like that. And so I want to challenge you, join back with us as we continue to look at COVID-19 and what it has for us. Why don't we pray? Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for your grace and your mercy. Thank you that you have overcome the world and that we have faith and confidence in who you are and protection in your name. Father, I pray that we would understand these evil angels and not underestimate them, but that we would completely understand how they work and be prepared to stand against them and be armored with your armor, that we may be able to withstand the wiles of the devil. Help us to stand firm upon your word and in our faith. And it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, I'll see you in 30 minutes. God bless.